I still remember the first time I felt something was wrong. Ethan used to come home excited to tell me about his day, but lately, his voice had changed. He was distracted, always looking at his watch, and his phone never left his side. When I asked if something was bothering him, he brushed it off with a tired smile, saying work was stressful. I wanted to believe him. For years, we had built a peaceful life together. I trusted him completely. But when trust starts to crack, even silence sounds suspicious. One evening, I noticed he had 2 chargers plugged in beside the bed. I laughed and asked if he was collecting phones now. He quickly unplugged one and said it was for a coworker. His reaction was so defensive that it made my stomach twist. That night, while he slept, I stared at him, wondering how well I really knew the man lying next to me. Over the next few weeks, small things kept piling up. He would step outside to take business calls and come back acting distant. He suddenly changed his passwords and became overly protective of his laptop. One afternoon, while doing laundry, I realized his shirt smelled like a new perfume, one I'd never worn. I tried to convince myself there had to be an explanation, but deep down, something told me the truth wasn't innocent. Then, one cold Saturday morning, Ethan said he was going to his brother's house to help fix a roof. After he left, I couldn't shake the heavy feeling in my chest. I decided to clean the basement to keep myself busy. While moving boxes near the furnace, something slipped and fell behind it. I bent down, reached in, and pulled out a small black phone. My hands started shaking. It wasn't his regular phone. I knew it instantly. The wallpaper was different. The case was plain and unfamiliar. My heart raced so fast I thought I might faint. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I sat on the cold floor, just staring at the screen as it lit up with a notification. "Can't wait to see you tonight, Red Heart." I felt my whole body go numb. Every suspicion I'd buried, every excuse I'd made for him, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I didn't open the messages yet. I just held the phone and stared at it, realizing my marriage might not be what I thought it was. I thought of all the nights I stayed up worrying if he was okay. All the times I defended him to my friends when they said he seemed distant. It hit me that the man I trusted with my whole heart might have been living another life right under my nose. In that moment, I knew everything was about to change. But I wasn't ready to confront him, not yet. I needed to see everything first. I needed to know the truth before I decided what to do with it. Rachel spent days trying to convince herself that she was imagining things. She told herself she was just tired, that every marriage went through quiet phases. Ethan had always been steady, patient, the kind of man who never raised his voice. But lately, it felt like he was walking on eggshells around her. Or maybe she was walking on them around him. Whenever she asked where he was going or when he'd be home, his answers grew shorter. He started keeping his phone face down, even during dinner. The man who once laughed with her over burnt toast now jumped if she reached for his phone by mistake. She tried to ignore the growing tension, but the signs became harder to brush aside. He came home late smelling like cologne he never used before. He started dressing better for work, wearing shirts she hadn't seen in months. And when he was home, he always seemed to be somewhere else, his mind distant, his smile forced. Rachel's instincts told her something was wrong, but her heart begged her not to believe it. She'd seen friends fall apart from mistrust, and she didn't want to be one of them. Then one morning, as Ethan packed for another conference, she noticed how calm he seemed. He kissed her cheek and promised to call when he landed, but the look in his eyes was different, cold, almost rehearsed. After he left, the house felt emptier than usual. Rachel stood there for a long time, trying to shake off the unease. Finally, she decided to clean the laundry room, a place she hadn't touched in weeks. Maybe staying busy would quiet her mind. As she moved baskets and old boxes, a faint vibration broke the silence. At first, she thought it was a loose pipe, but then she heard it again, a steady buzz like a phone on silent mode. Her pulse quickened. The sound was coming from behind the furnace. She hesitated, her hands trembling as she crouched down and reached behind it. Her fingers brushed against something smooth and warm. When she pulled it out, she froze. It was a black phone, not Ethan's regular one. No case, no scratches, just a simple device that felt too new to be forgotten. It was still buzzing in her hand, lighting up with an incoming message. For a few seconds, Rachel couldn't move. She stared at it, her breath shallow, her mind spinning. She didn't need to open it to know this was the thing she wasn't supposed to find. Her heart pounded as she turned the phone over and saw his fingerprint unlock it automatically. The home screen showed a woman's picture, someone she didn't recognize. That was the moment her world tilted. All the excuses, the late nights, the hidden smiles, they suddenly made sense. Her hands shook, but her voice stayed quiet as she whispered to herself. So this is what you've been hiding. Standing there in the dim light of the laundry room, Rachel knew she couldn't pretend anymore. The truth wasn't just close, it was already in her hands. Rachel sat on the cold floor, staring at the phone in her hand. Her chest felt tight, but her fingers moved on their own. She unlocked the screen again and opened the messages. The first one was from a woman named Amber. The words blurred for a second before they sank in. Can't wait to be in your arms again tonight. Counting the hours, love you. Her stomach turned. She scrolled higher, hoping it was some misunderstanding, maybe a coworker or an old friend. But message after message told her everything she needed to know. There were photos of Ethan and Amber together, smiling in restaurants, hugging in hotel rooms, standing too close to be anything but lovers. The most recent one showed them holding hands on a beach. Rachel's throat burned as she read his words. You make me feel alive again. Tears filled her eyes, but she kept reading, each message cutting deeper than the last. He had told Amber things he used to tell her. He called her my peace, my reason, the woman who understands me. And yet, with Rachel, he'd been saying she was too emotional, too sensitive, too clingy. It was as if he'd been rehearsing love in one life while criticizing it in another. Then she found the messages that made her heart stop. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together. Ethan had promised Amber that once things settled, they'd start fresh, buy a small house near the lake, maybe even get married someday. He wrote about wrapping things up and making it official. Rachel felt her world collapse with every word. The man who promised her forever was preparing to replace her. Her hands shook so hard she almost dropped the phone. She wanted to scream, to throw it against the wall, but she couldn't. She just sat there, numb, staring at the life Ethan had been living without her. She remembered the nights he claimed to be working late, the sudden trips out of town, the times he said he was too tired for dinner. Every lie lined up perfectly now. Rachel opened the gallery next, just to see how long it had been going on. The photos went back almost a year. Vacations she didn't know about, dinners he said were with clients, birthdays he'd spent at work. He looked happy in every picture, happier than he'd looked at home in months. Her heart broke in silence. She thought about all the moments she'd spent waiting for him, defending him, loving him without question. The betrayal wasn't just in the cheating. It was in the ease with which he lived both lives, as if she were just a background detail in his story. Rachel closed the phone and pressed it against her chest, trying to breathe. Her tears came slow and steady. She realized this wasn't just about a broken marriage. It was about a man who had built an entire second world while standing right beside her. And that was the part that hurt the most. Rachel didn't say a word that night. She put the phone back exactly where she found it, making sure everything looked untouched. When Ethan came home the next day, smiling like nothing was wrong, she felt her hands tremble under the table. But she kept her face calm, forcing a smile, pretending to listen as he talked about his meeting and how tired he was. Her heart was broken, but her mind was focused. Instead of confronting him, she started watching him closely. Every small detail mattered now. The times he left the house, the places he said he was going, the way he avoided eye contact when she asked about work. She noticed how he checked his phone in the bathroom, how he'd go outside to get fresh air, right before a text would come through. It was almost like seeing a stranger living in her husband's body. Rachel played her part perfectly. She cooked his favorite meals, laughed at his small jokes, and even hugged him goodnight. But inside, she was memorizing every word he said, every excuse he made. The more lies he told, the calmer she became. It wasn't peace, it was preparation. She didn't want to act out of anger. She wanted to be sure. At night, when he fell asleep, she'd quietly unlock the secret phone and start saving everything. Every message, every photo, every call log. She backed them all up on a small flash drive she kept hidden in her sewing box. She didn't even know what she'd do with it yet, but she knew she needed proof. She needed to control the moment when everything would fall apart. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan continued living his double life as if nothing had changed. He'd kiss her goodbye in the morning and send Amber messages about missing her before he even reached the office. Rachel read it all, her heart growing colder each time. The pain had started to harden into something stronger, something that looked a lot like resolve. She started preparing quietly for what came next. She gathered important documents, changed her passwords, and even opened a new bank account in her name. She didn't want to be left helpless when the truth finally exploded. Rachel wasn't planning to destroy him with anger. She wanted his lies to destroy themselves. One evening, Ethan came home late, smelling like another woman's perfume. Rachel helped him hang his coat, smiled, and said softly, "You must be exhausted." He nodded, unaware that the woman standing in front of him already knew everything. That night, as he slept peacefully beside her, Rachel sat awake, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but her mind wasn't. She thought about the woman named Amber, about the fake promises, about how easily Ethan lied to both of them. She decided then that she wouldn't let him keep living this lie. She would choose her moment carefully, the one that would end it all in silence and truth. When Ethan announced that he had another work trip coming up, Rachel didn't flinch. She had been waiting for this moment. Her hands felt steady as she smiled and said, "Of course, I'll help you pack." He seemed relaxed, unaware that the woman standing before him had already uncovered his secrets. Rachel folded his shirts neatly, placed his toiletries in the corner of his suitcase, and even slipped in his favorite tie. He kissed her on the forehead before leaving, promising to call once he checked in. She watched him drive away, her heart calm but her mind sharp as glass. The moment his car disappeared down the street, Rachel walked back inside and went straight to the laundry room. She pulled the hidden phone from behind the furnace and sat at the kitchen table. The silence in the house felt heavy, almost too still. She turned the phone on and saw fresh messages from Amber. Pictures, hearts, and long paragraphs filled with affection. Amber had no idea that the man she loved was married, living a double life under the same roof as the woman now reading every word. Rachel stared at the screen for a long time before typing her own message. Her fingers moved slowly but with purpose. "You deserve to know who Ethan really is. Here's the wife he forgot to mention." She paused, reading it over and over. Her heart pounded, not from sadness but from a quiet strength she hadn't felt before. But instead of pressing send, she deleted the message draft and leaned back in her chair. She wanted more than a private confrontation. She wanted the truth to come out in a way that neither Ethan nor Amber could escape. She spent the next few hours thinking carefully. She gathered every screenshot, every call record, and every photo from the secret phone. She printed some, emailed others to herself, and organized everything neatly. There was no shouting, no tears. Just focus. She wasn't planning to ruin his life with lies. She was going to let his own lies do it for her. By evening, she had a plan. She'd wait until Ethan was far enough away that he couldn't control the damage. Then, she would make sure both of his worlds crashed into each other at the same time. She wanted Amber to see who he really was, but she also wanted Ethan's truth to reach the people who believed in his perfect image. His family, his boss, everyone he'd fooled with his fake charm. When she was done preparing, Rachel placed the second phone on the counter and made herself a cup of tea. The house felt peaceful, almost too quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. She looked around the room that had once held love, laughter, and trust. Now it held something stronger, her clarity. She didn't need to scream or break anything. The truth would do the breaking for her, and soon, Ethan would finally understand what it felt like to lose everything he took for granted. Sunday morning arrived calm and bright, the kind of day that used to mean pancakes and laughter in Rachel's kitchen. This time, though, she sat at the table alone, sipping coffee, staring at the second phone lying beside her. She had waited for this moment patiently, letting Ethan dig his own grave one lie at a time. She knew from his messages that he was out having brunch with Amber. He had sent her a text before leaving the house that morning saying, "Heading out for errands, don't wait up." Rachel smiled at the irony. He had no idea that before his meal ended, everything he built would come crashing down. She unlocked the phone one last time. The screen lit up with new messages. Amber telling him she couldn't wait to see him again, asking if he had told her yet. Rachel read the words slowly, her chest tightening not from pain anymore, but from quiet resolve. She opened the group chat screen and added 3 names: Amber, his boss, and his mother. Each name represented a piece of his carefully hidden life. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second before typing. "I've been living a double life. Meet my wife, Rachel." She read it twice, steadying her breath. There was no anger in her heart, only finality. With one last look at the message, she pressed send. The phone buzzed almost immediately. At first, silence. Then chaos. Messages flooded in one after another, Amber asking, "What is this? Is this some kind of joke?" His boss replying, "Ethan, we need to talk immediately. This is unacceptable." And then a call came in from his mother. Rachel didn't answer. She didn't need to. She already knew what would follow. She set the phone down and waited. 10 minutes later, another call came, then another. The peace of the morning was broken by the sound of Ethan's world unraveling through that small device. Rachel finally turned the phone off and placed it beside her cup, her hands calm. Hours later, Ethan came rushing through the front door. His face was pale, his voice shaking. "Rachel, what did you do?" he shouted. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" Rachel looked at him steadily and said, "I didn't do anything, Ethan. You did this to yourself." I just pressed send. He stood there speechless, the weight of his choices finally crashing down on him. His phone kept ringing, his boss calling, then his mother, then no one. Amber had already blocked him. His job was gone within hours. Everything he'd worked for, every lie he'd told, all of it collapsed with one message. Rachel turned away and walked upstairs, leaving him in the quiet wreckage of his own making. She didn't feel joy or anger, only release. For the first time in months, she could finally breathe. The truth was out, and she didn't have to carry the burden anymore. When Ethan walked through the door that night, he looked like a man who had aged 10 years in one day. His clothes were wrinkled, his face pale, and his eyes full of panic. He dropped his car keys on the floor and stood in the doorway, staring at Rachel as if she were a stranger. The silence between them was heavy. He opened his mouth, but his voice cracked. "Rachel, what did you do?" She didn't move from the couch. Her tone was calm, almost too calm. "I just hit send," she said softly, looking straight at him. "Something you've been doing to everyone except me." Ethan's shoulders slumped. He rubbed his face with both hands, pacing back and forth like someone trying to escape a fire. "You don't understand," he said, his voice trembling. "It wasn't what you think. I messed up, but I can fix this. Please, Rachel, just listen to me." Rachel stayed quiet, her eyes following his every movement. For months, she had imagined what this moment would feel like, how she might scream or cry or demand answers. But none of that happened. The anger was gone, replaced by a calm that scared him more than any yelling could. She had nothing left to say that could change what he'd already done. He sank onto the chair across from her, his head in his hands. "I lost everything today," he whispered. "Amber won't speak to me, my boss fired me, Mom's furious. Rachel, please, I need you. You're my wife. You're the only one who's ever believed in me." Rachel's lips tightened. "You should have thought about that before you built a second life behind my back," she said quietly. "You didn't lose everything today, Ethan. You just got caught." He looked up, tears in his eyes. "I'll change," he said desperately. "I'll prove it to you. I'll go to therapy, I'll quit my job if I have to, I'll do anything. Just don't give up on me." But Rachel had already made her choice long before he walked through that door. She stood up slowly and looked at him. Not with hate, but with finality. "I'm not angry anymore," she said. "And that's how I know it's over. Because anger means I still care. I just want peace now, Ethan. That's all I ever wanted." He tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled it away gently. The distance between them felt wider than ever. He was crying now, begging, but she didn't respond. She walked past him, picked up her packed bag from near the stairs, and stopped for one last moment. "I hope someday you learn what honesty feels like," she said softly. Then she walked out the door without looking back. Ethan stood in the silence she left behind, realizing that the woman he'd taken for granted wasn't coming back. The truth had finally ended everything, and for Rachel, that truth was enough. In the days that followed, everything Ethan had built began to fall apart piece by piece. Word spread quickly. His boss refused to take his calls, and the company released a quiet statement about his termination. Friends who once admired him stopped answering his messages. His mother, heartbroken and embarrassed, told him she needed space to process what he'd done. The image of a successful, devoted husband that Ethan had worked so hard to create vanished overnight. Meanwhile, Rachel didn't look back. She moved quietly, carefully, and with purpose. There were no long arguments, no dramatic scenes. She simply went to a lawyer, filed for divorce, and had the papers delivered to Ethan's doorstep. Everything she needed, documents, money, personal items, was already in order. When she packed her things, she took only what mattered: a few photo albums, her books, and her peace of mind. The house that once felt like a home now felt heavy and cold. Rachel had spent years decorating it, filling it with memories and laughter. But now she couldn't stand to see its walls. They held too many reminders of lies she didn't deserve. So she left the keys on the kitchen counter and walked away. Ethan could keep it, the house he once dreamed of sharing with another woman. She found a small apartment in the city, on the 12th floor, overlooking the skyline. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. Her first night there, she sat by the window, listening to the soft hum of traffic below. The silence felt different. It wasn't loneliness anymore, it was freedom. For the first time in a long while, she could breathe without wondering what secret was waiting to surface. Ethan tried reaching out a few times, calling from unknown numbers and sending long messages full of apologies. He promised he'd changed, that he wanted to make things right. Rachel didn't reply. She'd learned that sometimes silence is the best answer. It wasn't revenge, it was release. At work, people whispered about him. Some felt sorry, most didn't. He'd lost not just his job, but his credibility. His co-workers kept their distance, unwilling to be tied to the scandal. The woman he risked everything for, Amber, disappeared from his life completely. She didn't respond to any of his attempts to explain. In the end, he was left alone in the big, empty house, surrounded by everything he thought he wanted but nothing he actually needed. Rachel spent her evenings rebuilding herself slowly. She took long walks after work, cooked simple meals, and read books that reminded her of who she used to be before the lies. She didn't talk about Ethan much. She didn't need to. The pain had turned into something quieter, something she could live with. Each night, as she looked out over the glowing city lights, she felt a small spark of peace grow inside her. The storm was finally over, and though it had destroyed a lot, it had also cleared her path. She had lost her marriage, but she had found herself, and that was enough. Ethan didn't stop trying. For weeks, his calls came day and night, always from different numbers. Sometimes he begged, sometimes he cried, sometimes he just sat in silence on the other end of the line. Rachel never answered. She didn't need to hear any more words from him. She had heard enough lies to last a lifetime. Each missed call reminded her of how far she had come, from being the woman who waited for him to come home to the woman who no longer cared if he ever did. The divorce was moving forward quietly. Rachel focused on her job, her peace, and the small routines that kept her grounded. Morning walks, coffee by the window, and evenings spent reading or listening to soft music filled her days now. The hurt was still there, but it no longer controlled her. It lived somewhere deep, fading a little more with each sunrise. One Friday evening, Rachel decided to do something she had been avoiding since she left. She went to the drawer where she had kept the second phone, the same one that had started everything. It was still there, fully charged, waiting like a ghost from another life. For a moment, she just stared at it, her heart steady but heavy. That phone had once been the weapon of her heartbreak, holding every secret, every betrayal. But now it was just an object, a reminder she didn't need anymore. She sat on the edge of her bed and turned it on. The screen lit up, showing hundreds of unread messages and photos. Ethan had tried to contact her there too, sending apologies she never saw. The messages from Amber were gone, probably deleted long ago, but the history still sat there like a wound that never closed. Rachel scrolled through them one last time. The pain was still sharp, but it didn't control her anymore. It felt distant, like reading about someone else's life. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked out of the apartment. The evening air was cool, carrying the smell of salt and sea. She drove to the coast, parked by the pier, and walked until she reached the edge where the waves hit the rocks. The ocean looked endless under the fading light. Rachel took a deep breath, held the phone in her hand, and whispered, "You don't owe me anymore." Then she let it go. The phone slipped from her fingers, hit the water, and disappeared beneath the surface. She stood there, watching the ripples spread until they vanished completely. It was quiet again, except for the soft sound of waves. For the first time in months, she felt light. Walking back to her car, Rachel realized she didn't need revenge or closure. She had already found both in her silence, in her peace, and in her decision to move on. The ocean had taken the last piece of her pain, and she wasn't planning to take it back. Months passed quietly, and Rachel's life began to feel whole again. The pain that once consumed her had turned into something softer, something she could live with. Every morning, she sat by her window with a warm cup of coffee, watching the sunrise over the city. It was her favorite moment of the day, a reminder that new beginnings don't always come with noise or applause. Sometimes they arrive in silence, like healing itself. She often thought about how far she had come. There was a time when her world revolved around Ethan, when his happiness defined hers, and his silence broke her. But now, her peace didn't depend on anyone else. She no longer replayed the memories or questioned what she did wrong. She finally understood that love without honesty isn't love. It's control wrapped in comfort. And once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. People around her noticed the change. She laughed more, slept better, and carried herself differently. Friends told her she seemed lighter, calmer, stronger. Rachel didn't deny it. She had learned the hardest lesson of all, that betrayal doesn't end you, it shapes you. The person who once doubted herself now trusted her instincts more than ever. She no longer needed to prove her worth to anyone. Sometimes on quiet nights, she would think about Ethan, not with anger, but with a strange kind of gratitude. He had taught her what kind of love she would never settle for again. His betrayal had pushed her toward her own strength, something she might never have found otherwise. She didn't hate him anymore, she simply didn't care. And that, she realized, was true freedom. Rachel also stopped seeing revenge as destruction. To her, real revenge wasn't making someone suffer. It was showing them that they no longer had power over your heart. She had done just that. Ethan's world had fallen apart, but she hadn't needed to shout or fight. Her calmness had said everything. Sometimes silence speaks louder than anger, and peace hurts more than payback ever could. One evening, as she watched the lights flicker across the city skyline, Rachel smiled to herself. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers again. She had built a new routine, made new friends, and even started helping others through their heartbreaks. She wanted people to know that pain doesn't have to break you. It can rebuild you into someone unshakable. She sipped her coffee and whispered to herself, "You did it. You let go." And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed it. Rachel knew she didn't win by hurting Ethan. She won by healing herself. Betrayal had taken everything she thought she needed, but in return, it gave her something priceless: peace, strength, and the courage to never look back.